let's talk about this Obamacare thing. And I want to invite any libertarians to call in. Or, right-wingers of any stripe. Or anybody, frankly. But libertarians love to call in and talk about freedom.
They do.
They do. Now, I cannot imagine. Well, I can't. But in the context of this country, and we have privacy issues, but when you talk about freedom broadly, what one of those, it seems to me, one of the key aspects of freedom is to be able to reach your full potential as a person, to pursue what you want to pursue with your life. And that means to have genuine opportunity. And that's not just, well, all the doors are open. It doesn't matter where you come from. It means also starting from a position that actually allows genuine opportunity. We know that you can predict a person's income at age 45 with an astonishing rate of accuracy based upon the area code, the zip code in which they're born. You can predict almost with a 95% accuracy the quality of the school that is available to them based upon the average income in the zip code they come from. We know that we have an incredibly anemic mobility rate in this country relative to other Western industrializations. So is there genuine freedom there? Well, one of the other aspects of freedom is to say that there are certain types of work I want to pursue. There are certain things I want to do with my life. But because I can't get health insurance for my children or for myself or my family, I'm going to be stuck in this job, and that is known as job lock. So the CBO came out with a report yesterday, and there were two basically big pieces of news that came out of it. One was an arcane part about the Affordable Care Act called risk corridors, wherein the Affordable Care Act mandates certain parameters for profits for insurance companies. And if you exceed those profits in the first 3 years of implementation, you need to pay into a fund which will actually go to insurance companies that get less than a certain amount of profit, basically to subsidize those insurance companies during the transition that takes place under the Affordable Care Act. So it's all within the industry. The Republicans wanted to call this a bailout and wanted to tie the raising of the debt ceiling limit to repealing this so-called bailout. Well, the CBO came out with a report which shows, in fact, that this supposed bailout, which is really just between insurance companies, it's set up in some respects like the Pension Guarantee Trust. That's another issue. But in some respects, insofar as that the industry pays into this fund to provide these risk corridors, that, in fact, the U.S. government is going to have a net gain of about $8 billion because there'll be more insurance companies that'll be making money outside of that risk corridor than we'll be losing it. So that fell apart for the Republicans. The other big piece of news that came out of the CBO report was, well, it was reported that there will be 2 million plus lost jobs as a result of the Affordable Care Act by 2024. And so everyone ran with this story. There'll be 2 million less, 2.5 million less jobs in 2024. But in fact, and by the end of the day, most had corrected themselves. What was reported is that there will be 2.5 million less workers in the job force, in the workforce, because they will voluntarily take themselves out of the workforce because they have access to health insurance and they don't need to be stuck in these jobs that they don't want to maintain health insurance. So, in other words, 2.5 million of these people, and there's some question as to whether or not how this breaks up. I'll get a little weedier about it in a moment. But essentially, 2.5 million people who will have the freedom to quit their job because they can afford health insurance outside of an employer-sponsored program. This is going to have two distinct effects on the labor force. One, it's going to mean that younger people, because many of these people are probably older, maybe they're 55, maybe they're 60, maybe they're 40, but they're probably around the higher age spectrum, because then they'll wait for Medicare. They don't need to work for those last 5 or 10 years. They can retire early. Or maybe they can go and do something entrepreneurial in some way. I don't know. It's going to mean that younger people are going to have more opportunities to find jobs because there's going to be less workers that they're competing with. And it's going to mean that there's going to be an upward pressure on wages because suddenly the supply of labor is going, well, not suddenly, over time, the supply of labor is going to shrink. And that means that employers will be competing to essentially buy that labor from members of the job, the worker force, the worker market. And so there's multiple benefits to this. There's benefits to the increased freedom for people who are no longer locked into a job that they can't stand because they have health insurance. It means that it's going to open up opportunities for younger people. And there's not going to be necessarily, 2.5 million younger people all of a sudden coming out of nowhere. And it will also, depending on the mix there, it will create upward pressure on wages. Probably particularly for people who are in the workforce for a long time, because you're going to be losing some older, more experienced workers. So this is great. It has nothing to do with employers hiring less people. It has everything to do with people choosing to work less.